Welcome to another episode of Brand Chops, where we're chopping up brands to see what they're made of. My name is Zach Lemire.
And I'm Chris Duhame. And today we're going to be talking about the importance of having an established brand voice and tone and being consistent with your communication. And today we have Allison Verhalen. She is the owner and president of AV Writing Services, and she's combined her English and psychology background to craft compelling content that resonates with her audiences with proven SEO and content strategy expertise.
Let's just jump right in. We want to really try and get the most value for our listeners. Today, we're talking about the value of a proper established brand voice and tone, which a lot of our listeners probably have never even heard of this. They don't even understand what it is. So in your experience, Allison, what are some practical first steps a small business can take to define their brand's tone, especially if they've never formally documented anything like this before?
Yeah, the first thing is always to define your brand, and really what that means, from a branding perspective, as you know, is how do you want people to feel about your brand? What's the reputation that you are trying to establish? Who's your ideal client? That's a big one. I do work with a lot of solopreneurs. Usually they're in the process of turning from solopreneur to smaller business. So their brand has been them. And it's just, the content is just the way I talk, which is fine when you're a solopreneur and you are your brand. But if you start getting other people on your team, if you start hiring someone like me to create content for you, you need a system in place, because I need to know how to create content that sounds like you, that sounds like your brand. And then the other thing I work with clients is often when they're in the process of rebranding, had an established brand, it worked for them up until they got to this point, and now they're trying to reposition themselves. So yeah, the first thing is always, what is that brand? What do you stand for? And who are your ideal clients? Because whatever brand you decide on, yes, it has to represent you as a company and it has to be authentic, but it also has to be something that resonates with your ideal client. So that's always something that I consider. Are your clients super professional? Are they going to be really turned off by swear words? Are they going to be more attracted to swear words because they think that's more real and authentic and telling it like it is? Always take that into account.
Yeah, and actually, I just have a quick follow-up question that's kind of backtracking. For the people who don't know the difference, can you just break down quickly what's the difference between voice and tone?
Yeah, voice is something that never changes. This is your brand voice. This is why we call them brand voice guidelines. These are the things that will always be in your content. These are the things that will never be in your content. That's kind of how you define your brand from a content perspective, as far as the language you're using. Tone is something that changes from piece to piece of content. If you send someone a congratulatory, just as an example from your personal life, a congrats on graduating, congrats on your wedding kind of a note versus a condolences note, those are going to have very different tones. It's still going to be your voice. It's still going to come from you, but the tone is going to be tailored to the piece of content that you are creating. So you're going to find as you create content for your brand that the tone is also going to shift based on the content, on where people are in the buyer journey, on what you want them to do next, on whether you're providing information or persuading them or trying to get them to take that next step in the buyer journey. Your tone is always going to shift a little bit. The voice will never shift. That is your brand voice that will be consistent throughout all of your content.
Awesome. Thank you for breaking that down for them.
Could you tell us a little bit about how and why that's so important for creative teams, sales teams, or any other departments that are in the business?
Yeah, because it has to be consistent throughout all of the teams. The brand voice is not just for marketing. The brand voice is for everyone, because it should be throughout all of your content with your audience, with prospects, with clients. People want to know when they reach out to you, when they communicate with you, when they read or see or hear pieces of content from you, that it's all going to sound more or less the same. So yeah, your sales team also has to be on board with the brand voice guidelines, especially since they're the ones directly interacting with your prospects and your clients, more so even than marketing. So if they get one thing from your marketing and a totally different experience in the sales process, that's really going to throw them for a loop and really turn them off.
Is there a way that you found where that will help sort of align those two? Is there is it a document that they need? What's the next step for somebody that's kind of going through this?
Yeah, creating your brand voice guidelines is always the first step. So that's going to be your document that you give to everyone. That goes to marketing, that goes to sales, that goes to everyone who is dealing directly with clients and prospects and creating content that will be seen or heard or viewed by clients and prospects. That lays out kind of at a basic level, like these are the words that we always use in our content. These are the words that we never use in our content. Obviously, you're not going to list every single word that gets used or every single word that does not get used in your content, but you want to provide kind of a feeling that your content is going to create. And what are the words that are going to evoke that feeling? You want to make sure those are used consistently. And then what are the words that are going to have an opposite effect, what's going to be really jarring and turn people off. You want to make sure you are avoiding those words in your content. Swear words are a common one that a lot of people avoid. I've also worked with people who are like, no, if people are turned off by that, I don't really want to work with them. Then okay, we can include that in your content. Other colloquial terms like super or awesome or fun are ones that people are like, no, I'm more professional than that. And other people are like, I use those words all the time. Yeah, if people are going to talk to me, if they're going to work with me, they're going to have to get used to that. So having that in your content will also be a great way to attract the people to you who want to work with you while repelling the people who are not a good fit for you. And that's another really important part of branding is, again, knowing who your ideal client is and making sure that you are attracting the right people and not trying to attract everyone. I think some people worry about repelling certain people. And it's like, well, if they're not right for you, then let them be repelled. That's not a good fit for you. This is a great time to decide that you don't want to work with them and let them decide they don't want to work with you. Let them self-select so that you can focus on the people who are a good fit.
I think that we all kind of resonate with a certain way of being spoken to or not. And that's why, like you were saying, locking into who it is that you're serving and what matters to them, not just demographically, but emotionally, so that you can craft this tone and it's like, wow, they're speaking my language. So for small businesses on the fence about creating this formal voice and tone guideline, like what are the biggest risks of staying in a we'll figure it out as we go mindset?
Well, usually if you're in the figure it out as we go level of doing things, that's usually when you don't get consistency because you have not decided on what your brand is and what your voice is. So you might be creating content, one piece of content thinking, oh, this is my target audience, or you might find it's affected by your mood. I know I've certainly found that, or what you've just been reading. I'm a big reader and a big consumer of content. So sometimes I find myself writing something and it sounds like something I was just reading or listening to. And I come back later and go, oh, that's not actually how I want to represent my brand or my client's brand if I'm writing for a client. Having that defined brand voice is going to help keep you consistent. And again, especially as you're bringing on new people onto your team and they're creating content for your brand and they're emailing with prospects and clients, you want to make sure that you have something that is systematized so that you get that consistency, which, as you know, branding is all about consistency.
Yeah, and that consistency builds trust, right? And that's what we were talking about even just when I was guesting on your show earlier this week.
Could you go over some pitfalls that you maybe have seen in the past for some small businesses, some things that they've done that you'd want to kind of warn against or help people sort of stay on the right path?
Yeah, I think a lot of the things we've already covered, not coming up with brand voice guidelines is a big one, not deciding on what your brand is, not deciding on what your brand is in general. I mean, we have had this discussion amongst ourselves about the fact that a lot of people think your brand is your logo. Okay, I have a logo, I'm done, I'm branded. No, that's not the case. You need to decide on fonts, you need to decide on colors, and you need to decide on the brand voice guidelines. What is the content? Yeah, it's all about how you want people to feel when they encounter your brand, which is hard. I'm not saying it's easy to like reverse engineer that. That's really tricky. But if you go back and you review your content and you go, no, this is really evoking emotions that I don't want to evoke. The other big problem that I see people making is not really thinking about their ideal client when they create content. They're thinking about them. They're thinking about themselves and what they want to convey and what they want to teach people. And that's great. But again, going back to the language you're using, especially those of us in professional services industries, we sometimes, without meaning to, tend to talk over people's heads. We use the jargon, we use the acronyms specific to our industry, and we just assume people understand what those mean because we're so used to them. Maybe your audience doesn't know. Maybe they have no clue what that term means. So don't talk over their heads. That is a big one, especially because I do work with a lot of people in professional services industries. They do tend to talk over people's heads without even realizing they're doing it. So always make sure that your content is as accessible as possible.
Do you recommend somebody taking their guidelines and maybe reaching out to a client or having somebody outside of their organization review it to make sure that those things don't become issues?
Yeah, absolutely. Have a branding expert like myself, like you guys, review it and make sure that it is in line with your brand. Have someone help you create brand voice guidelines. That is another thing I help my clients with. Is that's usually the first thing we do, actually, because I ask clients for their brand voice guidelines. And once in a while I get someone going, yeah, here you go. And most of the time I get a blank stare and a brand voice, what now? So having someone help you create those brand voice guidelines, and that way it's super easy. Yeah, here's the document. Anytime you have someone, whether it's onboarding a new employee who then will be interfacing with clients, with prospects, here's the document, here's the guidelines. It's probably going to take a little bit of trial and error. You're probably going to want to check in on their emails and their communications before you completely let them run free. But yeah, having that document, it just makes everything easier.
Do you think like getting a client's buy-in or like running it past them just to make sure you're not using jargon or things like that? Do you have a recommendation on how to do that?
Yes, if you have a client who's been working with you for a while, who's willing to do that, absolutely. That would be great, especially if it's an ideal client. If it's a client that you're not so thrilled about working with, and maybe they're not your favorite client, maybe don't ask them to review it. But if you don't have a client or someone who's willing to do that, even just asking someone who's not in your industry to review something and make sure that it makes sense to them, yeah, is always a recommendation. Always get a fresh pair of eyes.
It sounds like all this inconsistency, and we were talking about this before, and we talk about this a lot, about how the brand isn't for you. It's not about you. It's kind of its own personality that lives on its own. And without this consistency, you confuse people, because it's like I think we were just talking about this in our last episode about the branding resolutions, is if you show up at a party and change your outfit and change your name tag every 30 minutes, no one's going to ever get a chance to get to know who you are. And if they don't get to know you and they don't get the consistent interaction and the experience with you, they're not going to trust you. And that's what a brand's ultimate job is to build trust, familiarity, and recognition. And so that it's a personality that you get to know. And so if you're building out this brand voice and tone, it's not just how you speak, and there might be some overlap, but what you really want is, you don't want to dilute the brand. You don't want to create chaos and lead to, and honestly, there's a lot of wasted marketing efforts and missed opportunities for growth, because you're guessing all the time. You have no idea what's going to work, and you have no idea what you stand for. So you have no idea how to show up. And if you don't know how to show up, then I think the thing that we mentioned before is, like, if you showed up to this party and you changed clothes, and one day you were a clown, and then 30 minutes later you're a cowboy, and 30 minutes later you're back to yourself. And then you ask the party, did anyone meet Zach? Well, maybe one or two people met Zach, right? But you're not getting that impact that you're investing in, because that's what the brand is about.
Yeah, well, and I mean, think of it from the user's perspective. When you've got someone at a party who's constantly changing, you don't know what to expect from that person. And when you don't know what to expect, you're always a little on edge. You're never, like you said, it's always about building trust. And when you don't know what to expect from someone, you don't trust them. So yeah, showing up as the same person, as the same brand over and over. And that consistency, again, consistency builds trust, because this is what I'm doing. This is still what I'm doing. This is still who I am. This hasn't changed. I haven't changed. And just doing that again and again and again. Yeah, then people know what to expect from you. And when they know what to expect, then they can be at ease, and then they trust you.
Yeah, and if you shift from that, then they start to question things, and that's dangerous for a brand.
Yeah.
Is there any red flags that maybe somebody should be looking out for in their organization, where they're like, maybe they haven't gotten to this point yet, but this is like an indicator that they need to really look into this?
Yeah. Well, if marketing is bringing in leads and sales is not closing on those leads, I mean, any number of things could be leading to that. It could be a problem with your sales team, but that is one thing I would look at is the communication consistent? Are you bringing in, it could also be Problem with marketing. Maybe marketing is bringing in bad leads because their brand voice either is not consistent or it's not attracting the right customers, in which case you have to take another look at your marketing and be like, okay, is this really resonating with our ideal clients? And then go back to your marketing persona, develop that again, take a closer look at that. Is our brand in line with our marketing persona? And if it is, and if we're still getting bad leads, maybe we need to realign the marketing persona.
Those things are always there as foundational, and you definitely have to continue to build and learn from your experience and from the feedback you're getting. But here's a question. So there's so many small businesses that struggle to keep their messaging consistent. We're talking about consistency already, especially across different channels and departments. And this is just not just externally, but this is internally, because a lot of this messaging also attracts the right people you want to hire. So how can they develop guidelines that streamline content creation while staying true to their core values?
Yeah, having those core values as part of your brand voice guidelines is always important. So develop those first. Decide what you're going to stand for as a brand and what you're not. What are you going to tolerate and what are you not going to tolerate? And then from that, then again, and going back to your ideal client and what kind of language do they use and what do they want to hear and what do they not want to hear? That's when you start narrowing down the kind of language that you will be using. What words are we using? What words are we not using? That's really core to developing your brand voice guidelines. And always make sure that you are using, again, the language has to be authentic to the way that you talk and the language you use, but it also has to be really authentic to the language that your ideal clients use. Because language, I mean, not just like French versus English, but even I'm in Chicago and you guys are on the East Coast. There's bound to be some differences, or even English versus American English. There's always that disconnect. So making sure that you use the same language that your ideal clients are using, that is going to be another thing that builds that trust. Because if you start using language that they, even if they understand it, but it's just like, I don't use that. What do you mean you're calling that pie? That's not pie, that's pizza. Like, what is wrong with you? Those little things are going to clue people into, oh, this is not a member of my tribe. They are other. And despite the fact that we are now a global society, our brains are still wired for the tribe. And we still organize ourselves into tribes, and people are either of our tribe or they are not of our tribe. And language is a huge way to signal, yes, we are part of your tribe, or no, we're not. We're part of this other tribe.
I think a perfect example of this is marketing to children. Because if you're trying to market to children, you're ultimately trying to get the parent to buy them. The kid has no money. They're just they're the champion of the sale. You want them to be so jacked up about it. But if you went and talked to them about pricing and plastic sources and whatever it is and how easy it is to put together, they wouldn't care.
How educational
and if you use larger words, right? Yeah, you got to show how fun it is to play with. And then you got to make a bunch of weird crashing noises with your robots. And you got to really understand who you're appealing to so that sale can be made.
100%.
Another thing that I was thinking about when you were talking about that is how people pronounce maybe a city or something along those lines. Like one thing I noticed in radio spots, Concord is our capital in New Hampshire. And so if somebody says Concord, I know right away that whoever wrote that ad is not from this area. And so I think things like that happen a lot in Massachusetts and other places like that. But those are small things that maybe somebody doesn't think about, but I think it has a big impact.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point.
We've got one final question for you. And it's, how does the absence of a strong, unified brand voice affect the customer experience and ultimately customer loyalty?
Yeah, well, it's like the party example you were describing. When you don't have a consistent brand, you do tend to scattershot and you show up as different brands at different times without realizing that's what you're doing. But it does affect the user experience. You know, well, I met this clown and then I met this cowboy and then I met this mermaid, and you think of them as three different people. And the whole point of branding and marketing is to build that brand awareness and that brand loyalty. And if you're not showing up consistently, people have no idea who that mermaid is or who the cowboy is. It's like, I met them once. No, you met us 3 different times. Remember, there was this and this and this. And wait, that was all the same person? What? So yeah, you're not building that brand awareness. You're not building this, oh, this is this brand. Okay, this is what they do. This is who they help. Because that's what it's all about. They can't hire you. They can't refer you if they don't know who you're helping or what it is you do for the people that you help. So showing up consistently is key to just drilling into people. This is what I do. And I think that's another problem people run into with branding is it gets boring for them because they're sick of saying the same things over and over and over. But that's how you drill into people that this is what I do, this is who I help. But it also ensures that when one person runs into you and then another person hears that and then another person hears that, they're all getting the same message instead of getting this scattershot approach, and not really having a clear idea of who you are, what you do, who you help, why we should care. Getting that branding message out there again and again and again is so important because, okay, now I know what to expect from Zach because I hear the same message from him over and over in the same language with the same icons and the same visuals. All right, now I know what to expect from him. I know this is what he does. Now, if I need that, I know where to go. If I know someone who needs that, I know to send them Zach's way. Whereas now it's like a teenager. Try dealing with a teenager. You never know what you're going to get because the teenager isn't sure who they are yet. And they're just trying on different personalities as they grow up. That's frustrating for everyone involved. Don't do that with your brand. Don't be the teenage brand.
Yeah, that's a good example. Like not just teenagers in a single generation, but across generations. Like there's whole pieces of content out there. They just talk about what is it that your middle schooler's saying? What the hell does huzz mean? What does this mean? What is Riz? And why are people talking about pose 28? And I try to learn all these things so I can say it to my middle schooler. And she goes, how do you know these things? This is sus, daddy. And, like all these other things. But the point is like, I don't remember ever saying any of those words. And so even from generation to generation, the whole teenager thing, you can't rely on anything that you learned. And that's ultimately this, again, it's about trust. It's not just your brand is your personality. And this consistency builds trust. And that trust is what builds the relationship with the brand and the experience. And when you trust a brand to deliver on its promises time after time and to show up consistently, you will be less likely to question price, features, all the other things that people try to compete on when they're just skipping out on building a brand that matters to people. Well, I really appreciate your time today. If you want to tell the audience, like how can they best contact you if they need some help with some messaging and getting all this buttoned up?
Yeah, you can check out my website, which is AV, as in my initials, Allison Verhalen. That is avwritingservices.com. You can reach me directly at info@avwritingservices.com. I'm also on LinkedIn and YouTube as Allison Verhalen. I think I'm the only Allison Verhalen on those platforms, so it's really easy to find me.
And that's Verhalen, not Van Halen, which I accidentally typed 7 times today. It's spelled almost the same, and it wants to autocorrect almost every time, letting people know that it's VER.
Watch out for those Dutch names, yes.
All right, well, fantastic. Thank you so much for adding so much value today to our show. And for everyone's listening, don't forget to subscribe and like and share these things. And we'd love to hear your insights. And if you have trouble with your voice and tone or you want to know more about it, drop some comments into social. We'd love to engage with you. But until then, tune in next week where we chop up brands to see what they're made of.
See you guys.
Brand Chops is brought to you by the fine people at Pivot Creative. Pivot Creative is a full-service branding and marketing agency that partners with businesses to build brands that connect so that every dollar you spend is an investment and not an expense. If you need some branding or marketing guidance, a website, a new brand, or want to learn more about one of the topics we cover on the show, please reach out to us at pivotcreative.com. If you know someone that would benefit from learning more from one of our shows, please share the episode. Visit brand-chops.com. And as always, like and subscribe if you find this content to be helpful. See you next time on Brand Chops, where we chop up brands to see what they're made of.